is go to the directory, and the directory is like where all the files are kept on the hard disk. DOS stands for Disk Operating System, so you're actually working at the low level. Okay, so the first command is cd change directory and ... Okay, what ... does is take you to the root, right, which is the very highest level on the C drive. Come on, okay, cd period ... Okay, so we get back to the root. At that point, type lcn. So that's just a program that we're going to use. So this is the screen you get, right? Okay, so this screen, it's got the menu, right? Module status of your program, status of all modules. This is a module. Program maintenance, that's where we write our programs. Data management, calibration, setup, graphics in the program. So most of the time we just go to status of all modules and hit return, and it goes out and it's got a little COM port, and it goes and talks this, the computer talks to this box talks to the big unit. Most of the time when they're doing battery testing, they might have one computer controlling like 10 or 20 or 100 of these boxes, right? So it's low speed data acquisition. Now you can see we only have one module, so that's module 1, and it's in the stop position, right? We got power, but nothing's running, okay? So on the bottom, we have what we can do to check this out. F4, you can type F1 for help, but F4 gives you all of the modules out there, and it'll tell us what is our status. So it says that the module, it's in stop mode, and then when you do battery testing, you have cycles and steps, right? Most of the time you don't do one test on a battery, you do multiple tests or cycles, right? And you will program this, right? And it says, I'm in stop mode, so I got amps and volts and watts, and there's temperature back there too. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go to program, which is F5. Okay, well, let's view a current program. Okay, now when we view a current program, okay, we're going to didn't give me a program here. Here's how we write our programs. We've got a few different things we can do. We can do nothing, we can charge it, we can discharge, or we can let it rest, right? So most of the time what we do is we charge it and then let it rest for a while, right? And then we discharge it and let it rest a while. Batteries can never be left in a discharge state. They'll be damaged. So once you perform a discharge test, you either charge it with this or you charge it with this. Don't ever leave the batteries discharged. Okay? All right. Let me get out of here, and I want to get the program from the module. I'll see what program we had in there. So I got the program from the module. So this is a discharge program. So I've gone in here and I've selected discharge. I told it to discharge at 100 amps and at a voltage of 10 volts for a total of 1,000 watts. Okay. Now, so 100 amps, 10 volts, 1,000 watts. If I start pulling 100 amps from a battery, what's going to be the voltage on the battery? Something less than 12 volts, right? Okay, so you can't have all three of those things at the same time because the battery won't be at 10 volts. What you're really telling this is, I'm going to make up a voltage to discharge to, and it'll limit on whichever of these three it reaches. So if you exceed 1,000 watts, it'll limit to 1,000 watts. Now we just said that we're discharging for 100 amps, right? Okay, so the volts really doesn't matter here. Okay, it's going to limit at 100 amps. Because why? Because the 100 amps will be reached before we get to that voltage, right? So we're going to discharge at 100 amps, okay? And then we're going to, these allow you to reset either the amp hours or the watt hours, right? So we really want to count how many amp hours we get out of a battery. And then we have a set step time that we run. So we say if the time equals 30 minutes in the test, right? So this is in hours, minutes, seconds. You can set the time. So this test is really going to discharge at 100 amps for 30 minutes, right? So the next step, we press down for the next step. There is no next step. That was a bad program. I'm going to get program from our library. That means somebody tried to program it and didn't do it right. Okay, here's some of our tests from previous. The red top battery, the red ones over those are 44 amp hour batteries, right? The YT stood for yellow top. DOS is old, so you only had 8 characters to name a file, right? You had 8 characters dot. There's always an extension like .xls. That tells you the file type and then the name. So you can't use anything you want. So let's just get the red top 44, and here's the test, okay? This one will be better because there's 3 steps. So it says discharge at 44 amps. Here I have 7 volts and then 700 watts. This is a better program. Now, I said when we go to discharge a battery, we'd be at 12 volts. 12 volts in 44 amps is how many watts? Well, 44 times 10 would be 440. 2 times 44 is 80. So it'd be around 520 watts. Now that is less than the 700 watts. So the 700 watts won't limit us. When we go and discharge at 44, we won't be at 9 volts either. So the lowest one, or the one that's going to limit, is 44 amps, right? So that's important kind of concept on how this box works. You can set different parameters. Whatever limits first will limit the program. So if I put 100 watts there, it would limit on watts. If I put 11 volts, it might limit on volts, right? But I've got 9 volts, which is much low, and 700 watts, which is too high, so it's going to limit on amps, right? So you gotta, that's kind of the engineering behind it. Okay, so I reset the amp hours because I'm starting a new test, and this is the decision I tell it. I say if the voltage gets less than 10.5 volts, go to the next step. Because the SAE test is discharged to 10.5 volts. That's considered the end of the battery capacity. So when it discharges at 44 amps until it gets to 10.5 volts and it says, okay, move to the next step. It doesn't matter anything else. All that matters is the 10.5 volts. The next step is rest, okay? And it says, don't reset the watt hours. If the time is 5 minutes, then go to the next step. So we discharge at 44 amps to 10.5 volts, then we rest for 5 minutes. Why 5 minutes? I just picked it. It doesn't really matter, but batteries do get hot when they charge and discharge, so we give it a little rest, not much. And then the last step is we recharge the battery, right? Because you don't want to discharge and then without recharging. The nice thing about this box is it's automatic. You can set the test and leave safely, okay? If your program is good, right? If your program isn't good, you can actually overcharge your battery, right? And the guys have done that.